Now you don't have to be Chabad, the one Mashiach. Oh, no, you don't, no, you don't, no, you don't. You gotta want Mashiach to be a Yid. Now you don't have to be a Tzioini to love Eretz Yisrael. But you gotta love Eretz Yisrael to be a Yid. Oh, no, you don't have to be a Mikvah to learn Torah. Gotta learn some Torah to be a Yid. But you don't have to go to Ummah to hammer.
Good evening, my holy sisters and brothers. That's Joey Newcomb singing his song, To Be a Yid. That last line, you don't have to be a Litvak to learn some Torah, but you gotta learn some Torah to be a Yid. How's everybody doing? Let's light up the darkness. Maybe you can tell I'm excited. This is such a big DAF. You know, it's like sometimes we plug along, we have page after page, technical, how we derive the date, how we derive the calendar, how we derive the leap year, the 7, the 19. It's, you know, sometimes it gets it's difficult, right? And we have to sort of arm ourselves to dig deep and find the spiritual content in material that requires digging to get at the spirituality. And then we come to a page like Rosh Hashana 16. This one is a barnstormer. In fact, it's almost a shame. There's so many beautiful teachings on this page that I wish we could kind of spread them out and encounter 1 or 2 of these, you know, on every page for the next 20 pages. But it's not like that. So we got a really big day, some beautiful, 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 memorable teachings. This is a key DAF, and I'm so glad you're here with me for it. Who's tuning in and letting us know where they're watching from? Melissa in Great Neck, Paul in Chicago, James in Indianapolis, Rose in New Mexico, Renee in Indiana, Paul in the Great Northwest, Sharon in New Jersey, Gwen in Michigan, Jose in Miami Lakes, Yehudit in South Carolina, Leona in Illinois, Bill in Mid-Missouri, Chaim in Charlotte, Rochelle in Modesto, Terry in Minnesota, Stephen in New Hampshire, Renee, I heard Fish's Avinu Malkeinu today on the old iPod. We caught fish last night at the forum. Wow, what a great show. Been singing simple all day. That's for the fish heads out there. Anyway, wait a second. Over there on the YouTube side, Marjorie in Virginia, Seraphim saying Shalom Havarim from Sacramento. Marjorie, really like that song. Isn't Joey Newcomb's song great? To Be a Yid. That's an awesome, he's got 2 albums. That's the first album, the 2019 album. Okay, what was I going to do? Oh, yes. Today's episode, this key DAF of AT Daily, is sponsored by Mike Schofler in honor, in loving memory of his dad, Max Schofler, Moshe ben Naftali, a mensch who never spoke poorly of anybody. Talk about a short and profound tribute. How beautiful. If all of us could live a life and that later somebody could say about us, a mensch who never spoke poorly of anyone. Wow, that is something to aspire to. We honor Max today. May our learning today be a credit to him and bring his already lofty neshama even a little bit higher in the world of souls. And Mike, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. Thank you for donating and enabling us to reach more people with more Torah. And we say Amen. All right, no previews or other kinds of material. There's just so much material on this page. Where are we? We're on page 16 here in Tractate Rosh Hashana. This is the 9th volume of the Talmud, the laws of Rosh Hashana. We're in chapter 1 today, opening Mishnah number 2, right at the top of the A side of page 16. The Mishnah. At 4 times of the year, the world is judged. On Passover, judgment is passed concerning grain. On Shavuos, concerning fruits that grow on a tree. On Rosh Hashana, all creatures pass before him like sheep. As it is stated, he who fashions their hearts alike, who considers all their deeds. Psalm 33, verse 15. And fourth, on the festival of Sukkot, they are judged concerning water, i.e. the rainfall of the coming year. That is our Mishnah. The first Mishnah was that there are 4 Rosh Hashanas, 4 openings of the year for different purposes from when we measure. That was a much more technical type of discussion. Now we're talking about the world and its creatures being judged by the Holy One. We begin, the Gemara. The Mishnah taught that on Passover, judgment is passed concerning grain. Well, the Gemara asks, which grain is judged on Passover? If we say it is the grain that is presently standing in the fields, ready to be reaped between Passover, which is in the spring, the month of Nisan, and Shavuos, which is in the summer, or near the summer, in the month of Sivan, when was judgment passed with regard to all those events that already happened to the grain while it was growing during the winter? Rather, the Mishnah must be referring to the grain that will be sown over the coming year. So the Gemara asks further, is this to say that only one judgment is passed concerning a particular crop and no more? But isn't it taught in a Baraisa, if grain suffers an incident or accident before Passover, it was judged in the past, on the previous Passover. If this occurs after Passover, it was judged this Passover for the future. And similarly, if a person suffered an incident or an accident before Yom Kippur, he was judged in the past, the previous Rosh Hashana. If this occurs after Yom Kippur, he was judged on this Rosh Hashana for the future, for the coming year. Rava said, learn from this that 2 judgments are passed concerning each crop. One covering the period between the time that the grain is sown, the seeds are sown, and Passover, and another judgment covering the period between Passover and the time the grain is harvested. Abaye said, therefore, if a person sees that his slow-growing crops, those that are sown in the beginning of the winter but ripen only in the spring or summer, are doing well, so he should quickly sow fast-growing crops, such as barley, which can be sown at the end of the winter and still ripen before Passover, as before it is brought to judgment on the next Passover, it will already have successfully grown, since he knows that this year's crops were judged for a favorable yield. One might also remember the popular folk wisdom, make hay while the sun shines, right? In other words, if you see that things are going well, that you've been judged favorably this season, hasten to plant more. Next year, you might not have such a favorable judgment. If you see that the slow-moving crops are, starting to flourish, get more into the ground, especially the fast ripening grain. Take advantage while you see that this is a favorable time for yourself, perhaps for your community. The Gemara raises a question about our Mishnah. Whose opinion is expressed in our Mishnah? It is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Meir, and it is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and it is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosei, and it is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nassim. Now the Gemara will explain why our Mishnah seems to conflict with the opinions of these 4 sages. The Gemara explains, as it is taught in a Baraisa, all are judged on Rosh Hashana, and their sentence is sealed on Yom Kippur. So that is our basic understanding, right? Anybody who goes to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah has heard this basic idea that we're all judged on Rosh Hashanah. Like sheep, we all come before the heavenly court, and we are each individually judged. But the sentence is not handed down. It's not sealed until Yom Kippur. And you could even sweeten the decree beyond Yom Kippur as late as Hoshana Rabbah, right? But that's the basic idea, right? So it is taught in a Baraisa, all are judged on Rosh Hashanah, and their sentence is sealed on Yom Kippur. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, all are judged on Rosh Hashanah, and their sentence is sealed each in its own time. We come before the heavenly throne for judgment, and then God reserves judgment and issues our sentence each in his own time. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda. On Passover, the sentence is sealed concerning the grain. On Shavuos, the sentence is sealed concerning fruits that grow on a tree. And on the festival of Sukkot, they are judged concerning water. And mankind is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and the sentence is sealed on Yom Kippur. So you see that our sages have this sense of, normally when we think about being judged, we have this idea, well, I as an individual, I will be judged, maybe I will be granted another year of life, maybe I won't, maybe I will be granted a successful livelihood this year, maybe I won't, maybe people that are close to me will remain close to me, maybe they won't. And we just think about it ourselves as our individual, what matters to us individually and how we're going to be judged. But in here we see that the sages are also saying that, how much grain is given to the community in a year, how much rain is falling for a community in the year, how fruitful the trees are going to be in the orchards, this is particularly in the land of Israel, how it's going to be for the year. These are actually all matters of heavenly judgment. These are it's a very pious approach to the events of the world. God is interested and God is passing judgment on us. Now, it's not always like, well, we were good last year, so he's giving us lots of fruit the next year. We were bad last year, so he's giving us very little fruit. It's not so, quid pro quo as that. It's not so simple. If it were, God's hand would not be hidden in the world, and God chooses to be hidden in the world. Nevertheless, the world is such a complex clockwork, as it were. God is always, guiding everything that's happening in the world. It's just that we can't understand what God's purpose is from moment to moment, day to day, even year to year. But when we leave this world and look back on our lives, or when Mashiach comes and we all look back on the course of human history, then we'll understand what God was doing exactly. Only some of God's judgments are apparent to us, but God is judging us, and this is the manner and the time that he is judging according to these opinions. Where am I? And so Rabbi Yehuda finishes by saying, and mankind is judged on Rosh Hashanah. Remember, not the Jewish nation. Humankind are judged on Rosh Hashanah. All people, Jewish or not. And the sentence is sealed on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Yosei says, a person is judged every day, and not just once a year. Well, how does he prove that? How does he derive that? He looks to Job 7:18, where it says, you visit him every morning, meaning that every morning an accounting is made and a judgment is passed. Rabbi Nassan says, a person is judged every hour. As it is stated, Job 7:18, you try him every moment. And lest you say that actually the Mishnah is taught in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, and when the Mishnah is taught, it is taught with regard to the sentence and not the judgments, which are all passed on Rosh Hashanah, right? So now we can see, just like in a human court, You have the trial phase in which guilty, not guilty is rendered, and then you have the sentencing phase. So it might be that God passes judgment on Rosh Hashanah, but we only hear about the sentence. The sentence is issued later. And when the Mishnah is taught, it is taught with regard to the sentence and not the judgments, which are all passed on Rosh Hashanah. If so, it is difficult with regard to humankind, as the Mishnah should have stated that the sentence is sealed on Yom Kippur. So Rava answers, the Tana of the Mishnah, the rabbi of the Mishnah, is a Tana from the school of Rabbi Yishmael. As a Tana from the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught, at 4 times of the year, the world is judged. On Passover concerning grain, on Shavuos concerning fruits that grow on a tree, on the festival of Sukkot, they are judged concerning water, meaning the rain that will come during the winter, and humankind is judged on Rosh Hashanah, and the sentence is sealed on Yom Kippur. And when the Mishnah is taught, it is taught with regard to the beginning of the judgment process, i.e., the judgment of mankind, of humankind, is initially passed on Rosh Hashanah. Rav Chisda said, what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Yosei? The Gemara is astonished by this question. Why ask about his reason? He gave you his reason. The verse that states, you visit him every morning, from the verse from Job. And the Gemara explains, this is what we are saying. If Rabbi Yosei relies on this verse, you visit him every morning, to say that a person is judged every day, but what is the reason that he did not state his opinions in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Nassan, who derives it from the next words in the same verse from Job, that a person is judged every hour? And if you say that he holds that the verse, you try him every moment, cannot serve as proof, because trying merely indicates examination, not passing judgment, then in the same way, visiting, which happens according to the verse every day, also merely indicates examination rather than judgment. Rather, Rav Chisda said, Rabbi Yosei's reason is from here. Another verse which states, to make the judgment of his servant and the judgment of his people Israel at all times, as each day may require. That's 1 Kings 8:19, which indicates that the world is judged. The entire world is judged every day. Now, a note from Rav Steinsaltz. He says, the Ran, the commentator of the Ran, explains that Adam and Eve were created on Rosh Hashanah, according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. And they were judged on that day, right? Adam and Eve, on the day that they were created, they committed the first sin, and they were judged on that day. So they were created on Rosh Hashanah, and they were judged on Rosh Hashanah. So they were created, and they were judged on the first day. That day subsequently became the day of judgment for their descendants, meaning all humanity. According to Rabbi Yehoshua, who holds that the creation of the world took place in Nisan, Rosh Hashanah was set as the day of judgment because it is close to Yom Kippur, the day of forgiveness and atonement. Rosh Hashanah therefore gives people the opportunity to mend their ways and merit atonement. The Meiri offers an alternative explanation. Since Rosh Hashanah is the time when one gathers from the field the fruits of his year's labor, right? He's been working all spring, summer, fall. Now he's harvested. He's feeling like, oh, I did a good job. Look at my storehouse. It's filled with the product, the fruit of my labor from this whole year. That's a time when somebody could grow arrogant, a little bit complacent in his spiritual growth, and that's just the time that God appointed for him to be judged. Rosh Hashanah, when all people come before the heavenly throne for judgment. Where was I? Okay, about this verse, Rav Chisda said, when a king and a community are brought before God for judgment, the king is brought in for judgment first. Now, is this a benefit to the king, or is this a sacrifice that the king makes, sort of like a really awesome, brave, platoon leader who doesn't lead from behind but leads from in front? He takes his men in, and he's the first one in the breach. Is that the role of the king? Is that why he is judged even before the rest of his community? As it is stated, to make the judgment of his servant and afterward, and the judgment of his people Israel. That's that line from Kings that we read a moment ago. What is the reason for this? If you wish, say that it is not proper conduct for the king to stand outside the courtroom and wait for the trial of his subjects to come to an end. And if you wish, say instead that the king is brought in first so that he may be judged before God's anger intensifies due to the sins of the community, and consequently, he may be saved from an overly harsh judgment. So it is an advantage to the king to be judged first, according to that interpretation. We continue. Rav Yosef said, in accordance with whose opinion do we pray nowadays on a daily basis for the sick and afflicted? Right? Every time we say the Shemona Esrei, the standing prayer, we include a supplication to God for the healing of the sick in this world. And we often, when I'm praying, I mention certain people's names specifically that are ill, that truly need a healing, and I'm praying for their healing. So we do that on a daily basis. Why do we do that on a daily basis? The Gemara repeats the question. In accordance with whose opinion do we pray every day for the healing of the sick and afflicted? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, who holds that one is judged every day. And so there is reason to pray every day in order to affect the outcome of his judgment. And if you wish, say that actually normative practice is even in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, who hold that one is judged only once a year, but also in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yitzhak. As Rabbi Yitzhak said, crying out to God is beneficial for a person both before his sentence has been issued and after his sentence has been issued. In other words, the Gemara is asking, if we are all judged on Rosh Hashana and perhaps the sentence is issued and sealed on Yom Kippur or shortly thereafter during the fall holidays, why, when somebody gets sick a few months later, are we going to pray for their healing? Hasn't the judgment already been issued back during the high holidays, whether this person would survive his illness or not? And now we're learning, well, according to Rabbi Yosef, a person's judged every day, so we don't know what the outcome will be. And there is this overriding opinion, by the way, that we've seen before among the sages, especially we encountered it in Tractate Brachos, that when a person is sick, when they're seriously ill, that person is on trial for their life, right? They're at that moment having a trial. They may or may not survive. It's like up in heaven, this person has angel advocates arguing, please let this spare this person, God. He's done so much good in the world. He will do so much good in the world. And there's an accusing angel saying, well, maybe it's his time. Maybe it's his time. And while that's going on, we come in as the character witnesses and pray on that person's behalf, and we can help sway the judgment. It is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, for what reason did the Torah say, bring the Omer offering on the second day of Passover, right? So recall that on the first day of Passover, it's first of all, that's the new year for certain matters, right? Like the tally of the count of kings, etc. So that's Passover. And on the second day of Passover, we start counting the Omer, and we'll count 50 days, and that brings us to Shavuos. During the counting, we open the counting by bringing the Omer offering, which is a barley offering, and then 50 days later, on the holiday of Shavuos, we bring the 2 loaves. And we have a teaching that we've learned elsewhere that it's sort of like a time of refining our character during those 7 weeks between Passover and Shavuos, where initially we're eating barley, right, which is like animal food, and at the end, we're able to eat the new wheat of that year, and we celebrate that with the 2 loaves. And it's like we've graduated from barley to wheat, from barley to bread, from animal food to human food, because we've refined our character to become more human. Okay, so we're questioning this. Why do we bring the offering on the second day of Passover? It is because Passover is the time of grain, the beginning of the grain harvest season, and therefore the Holy One, blessed be He, said, bring the Omer offering before me on Passover so that the grain in the fields will be blessed for you. And for what reason did the Torah say, bring the offering of the 2 loaves from the new wheat on Shavuos? It is because Shavuos is the time of the fruits that grow on a tree when it begins to ripen. And therefore the Holy One, blessed be He, said, bring the offering of the 2 loaves before me on Shavuos, so that the fruits that grow on a tree will be blessed for you. And for what reason did the Torah say, pour water onto the altar in the temple on the festival of Sukkot, right? So a few weeks after Rosh Hashana, a couple weeks. And the Holy One, blessed be He, said, pour water before me on the festival of Sukkot, so that the rains of the year, which begin to fall after Sukkot in the winter months, will be blessed for you. Nice that we're reading about this today. We just had a big rain in LA for the first time in a long time. And recite before me on Rosh Hashana verses that mention kingships, remembrances, and shofar, right? So during the liturgy of Rosh Hashana, we will sort of recite all the verses from the Torah which mention God as the king, remembering God, or God remembering us, and the blasting of the shofar. Why do we do that? We mention the verses that mention God as king so that, or God tells us to mention those verses, so that you will crown me as king over you, God speaking. You mention the kingship verses in the Torah so that you will crown me as a king over you, right? Like a king isn't a king without subjects. God gives us so much every day. What does God ask of us? To remember Him, to appreciate Him, to thank Him. And then He keeps giving and giving and giving and giving. So what does He ask? That we remember Him, that we crown Him as a king over us by appreciating Him and thanking Him. Kingship, so that you will crown me as a king over you. Remembrance, so that your remembrance will rise before me for good. That our act of remembering God pleases God and makes Him better disposed toward us. And with what will the remembrance rise? It will rise with the shofar. As our verse, we pray, we speak prayers, we sing, we do all this with our mouths and thoughts and our bodies and our bowing and etc. But all of that is sort of carried up to heaven on the voice of the shofar. Similarly, Rabbi Abahu said, why does one sound a blast with a shofar made from a ram's horn? Why do we use the ram's horn shofar? Where am I? Why does one sound the blast with a shofar made from a ram's horn on Rosh Hashana? The Holy One, blessed be He, said, sound a blast before me with a shofar made from a ram's horn, so that I will remember for you the Akedas Yitzhak, the binding of Isaac, the son of Abraham, in whose stead a ram was sacrificed, and I will ascribe it to you as if you had bound yourselves before me. Right? Abraham trusted God so much that when God said, bring your son up as an offering, Abraham said, all right, I'll do it. I don't know how this is going to turn out. If you're asking me to sacrifice my son, I'll do it. I've been reading this passage ever since COVID began. I read this every day. I always find something new in the passage of the binding of Isaac. Literally every day I see something new. And my feeling, so over time, is I just feel like, and especially because God says to Abraham the same words, Lech Lecha, right? When He tells him to leave your father's house and go, go and go, right? Or go a-going. Go yourself or go to yourself. There's a lot of ways to translate Lech Lecha, go and get going. But He says that again when He tells him to take his son up on the mountain to sacrifice him. Lech Lecha. And I just have this feeling that God told Abraham to leave his father's house and go on this journey and walk before God, and it went really well. There were tests, there were difficulties, but Abraham's life went fantastic, right? It's a really successful life. And not just financially, but in every way, and in the way that he was able to, create this incredible hospitality and bring people under the wings of God's presence and bring awareness of the one God to everyone that he met through his generosity and hospitality. And it went so well that when God said to him again, Lech Lecha, I think that just kind of triggered trust in Abraham, and he went. But at any rate, why do we blow the shofar on a ram's horn at Rosh Hashanah? So that God will remember how Abraham trusted God so much and was willing to do anything that God asked. And in that merit, may God be kind to us as if we were willing to put it all on the line like our ancestor Abraham. Where am I? Yes, Rabbi Yitzhak said, why does one sound a blast on Rosh Hashanah? And the Gemara is astonished by the question, why do we sound a blast? The Merciful One states in the verse, sound, tiku, a shofar, Psalm 81:4. Rather, the question is, why does one sound a staccato series of shofar blasts, a teruah, in addition to the long, continuous shofar blast, the tekiah? And the Gemara is still surprised by the question, why do we sound a teruah? The Merciful One states in the Torah, in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, it shall be a day of solemn rest for you, a memorial proclaimed with the blast of horns, a teruah. Rather, Rabbi Yitzhak asked about the common practice in Jewish communities, which is not explicitly stated in the Torah. Why does one sound a long, continuous shofar blast, the tekiah, and then a staccato series of shofar blasts, the teruah, while the congregation is still sitting before the silent prayer? And then we sound again a tekiah and a teruah while they are standing. This is what we do on Rosh Hashanah during the Amidah. And he answers, in order to confuse the Satan. Right? Why do we have all these different blasts and this choreography of the blasts on Rosh Hashanah? And this is in order to confuse the Satan, Satan. Right? But remember that Satan is an angel. In the Jewish understanding, it's not some kind of devil who is opposed to God. He's an employee of God, and his job is to be the prosecutor and to bring charges against the other creatures, particularly the humans, and to say, well, look, God, look at what these people did. Look at what this individual, these are all the sins that he's done. This is all the ways in which, he was inconsiderate of others, took advantage of others, exploited others, hurt others, etc. And then the angel advocates will say, well, look at all the good things that he's done, and then God passes judgment. But it's to our benefit if we can confuse the angel prosecutor. And how do we do that? With the shofar blasts of Rosh Hashanah, which are kind of start and stop, start and stop. And that's how we end up with, these familiar, the tekiah. The teruah, and then we start mixing it up. We also add the shevarim, and then we, start mixing them up. And sometimes it's a tekiah and a shevarim and a tekiah. Sometimes a tekiah and a teruah and a tekiah, and we keep mixing it up. And according to Rabbi Yitzhak, this is to confuse Satan when he's bringing charges against us during the judgment of Rosh Hashanah. And Rabbi Yitzhak said, so we're in a section now where we're getting a bunch of teachings from Rabbi Yitzhak. And Rabbi Yitzhak said, by the way, we're on the top of the B side of page 16. And Rabbi Yitzhak said, playing on the double meaning of the word marry in, which can mean either sound a teruah or cause misfortune. So he says, any year which, due to some mishap, the shofar was not sounded at its beginning, that year will suffer evil and misfortune at its end. And what is the reason? Because Satan was not confused, and he was able to put forward his accusations so that the Jewish people will be punished. I'm skipping the next one. And Rabbi Yitzhak said, a man is judged only according to his deeds at the time of his judgment, and not according to his future deeds, meaning his future sins. As it is stated with regard to Yishmael, right? Abraham's older son, Yishmael. For God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. So this is when after Sarah was finally had her prayer answered, and she gave birth to Yitzhak, and then as Yitzhak was growing up in the house, she observed that this older boy that Abraham fathered by Sarah's slave Hagar, Ishmael, was in some way a danger to Yitzhak. And she said to Abraham, you have to cast this boy and his mother out of our home. Now, Abraham is chesed. I mean, he personifies loving kindness. For him to put out Hagar and his son, Ishmael, to send them away is the hardest. It was impossible for him. That's why God had to intervene and say, listen to your wife, do what she says, send them out. That's what's necessary right now. Later, after Sarah dies, he brings Hagar back to his home, marries her again, actually, and brings Ishmael back. So then they could see that it wasn't personal. But at this time, he casts them out. And when Hagar and Ishmael are out in the desert, Hagar panics and thinks they're going to die of thirst. And God sends an angel to her and says, don't worry, right? And says this line, where was it? For God has heard the voice of the lad where he is. Now, Ishmael is associated that in the future, he's going to be very dangerous to the Jewish people, and he's going to bring a lot of harm to the Jewish people. But right now, he's a boy. He hasn't done that yet. And that's why he's permitted to live, because he's only judged according to what he's done, and he, does not merit death. And from that, we learn that a person maybe God knows what we're going to do in our future, but God doesn't take our life away from us just because we're going to commit evil later in our life. This is the idea that free will is given. Maybe we'll change our minds. Maybe we'll change our destiny in some way. And so we are judged according to our past deeds, not our future deeds. Although Ishmael and his descendants would act wickedly in the future, his prayer was heard and answered because he was innocent at the time. Another teaching of Rabbi Yitzhak. Rabbi Yitzhak said, 3 matters evoke a person's sins, and they are, in other words, this causes you to, if you do these activities, this causes you to be judged by the heavenly court. And when you're judged by the heavenly court, your sins are raised, right? Satan comes up and says, okay, well, now that he's being judged, let's examine his past deeds. What are these matters that cause a person's sins to be evoked? Number 1, endangering oneself by sitting next to an inclined wall that is about to collapse. In other words, when you put yourself unnecessarily in harm's way, when you endanger your life, you cause yourself to be judged in heaven, because they might need to send a little miracle to save you from death. I'm immediately reminded of all these TikTok videos and other social media videos where people want to go take selfies of them walking on the edge of a cliff, or like riding a bicycle over the arches, the suspended arches high above a bridge. I mean, crazy, dangerous stuff just to attract eyeballs to their social media page. That person is invoking judgment upon themselves by risking so much. If it's a controlled stunt with safety measures in place, well, then they're not doing that because they're not endangering their lives. But anybody who takes needless risk and endangers their life causes themselves to be judged in heaven, according to Rabbi Yitzhak. Number 2, expecting prayer to be accepted, as that leads to an assessment of one's status and merit. If you pray with an arrogant attitude that you should have your prayers answered for whatever reason, you lack humility and you cause yourself to be judged. And number 3, passing a case against another to heaven. You should never say, a person should never say to another person, may God judge you. If you ever say to another person, may God judge you, at that moment, you are asking God to judge yourself. That's according to Rabbi Yitzhak. For Rabbi Avin said, anyone who passes a case against another person to God is punished first. Praying for God to pass judgment on another causes one's own deeds to be examined and compared with the deeds of the other. As it is stated, and Sarai said to Abram, before their names were changed to Sarah and Abraham, my anger be upon you. I have given my maid unto your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her eyes. Let the Lord judge between me and you. So Sarah did this. She said, may God judge between you and me. May God judge you. I think I'll be innocent in this matter. And it is written afterward, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Sarah called upon heaven to pass judgment between her and her husband, and therefore she was punished and died first by quite a bit. Sarah dies at the age of 127. Abraham dies at the age of 175. And Rabbi Yitzhak said, a person's sentence is torn up on account of 4 types of actions. All right, now here we go. This is the flip side. This is what you really want to pay attention to, right? What causes a negative sentence to be torn up? 1, giving charity. 2, crying out in prayer. 3, a change of one's name. 4, a change of one's deeds for the better. Now, I think we intuitively grasp why giving charity, right, taking care of others, is going to sweeten a judgment against ourselves. Crying out in prayer is going to sweeten the judgment. Changing one's deeds, right, making an atonement, reforming, refining one's character will certainly sweeten the decree. Changing one's name? I mean, what? Do I just fill out a new birth certificate and now I'm going to get a whole new judgment from God? I think what is being said here is maybe you actually change your name, but what you're really doing is changing your reputation. Now, you can't do that very quickly. To actually change one's name, meaning the way that what people associate with you, what is your name in the world, to make a change in that means you've already done all these other things, right? To change your name in the world, you must change your deeds. You must make atonement. You must make things right. You really have to up your game as a mensch in order to change your name in this world. An allusion may be found in Scripture for all of these. Giving charity, as it is written, and charity delivers from death, Proverbs 10:2. Crying out in prayer, as it is written, then they cry to the Lord in their trouble, and he brings them out of their distresses. Psalm 107:28. Changing one's name, as it is written, as for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai anymore, but Sarah shall her name be. And it is written there, and I will bless her, and I will also give you a son from her. A change of one's deeds to the better, as it is written, Jonah 3:10, and God saw their deeds. And it is written there, and God repented of the evil which he had said he would do to them, and he did not do it. Right? Jonah is the most successful prophet of all time. He was sent to the mega metropolis of Nineveh, where the people were steeped in sin, almost like Sodom and Gomorrah, told them that God was very angry with them and he was going to destroy them. And they're like, oh, okay, we're going to change. And they did. And so then God did not strike them down. Jonah was a reluctant prophet, but the most successful prophet, in so many ways. And some say also a change of one's place of residence cancels an evil judgment, as it is written, Genesis 12:1. And the Lord said to Abram, go you out of your country, and afterward it is written, and I will make of you a great nation. The Gemara explains, and the other one, i.e., Rabbi Yitzhak, who does not include a change of residence in his list, holds that in the case of Abram, it was the merit and sanctity of Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, that helped him become the father of a great nation, and not just the fact that he changed his place of residence. That's actually all I'm going to be covering tonight. I should have mentioned, get your comments and questions in. But I will say, so we have a little dispute there. Does changing your residence cause us to obtain a more favorable judgment from heaven? And I would suggest, depends, right? Depends what you do when you change your residence. If you change your residence because you want to get a fresh start and you want to be in a place where you're going to not associate with the same people with whom you were getting into trouble, now you're going to form a new group of friends, who are sort of living at a more, lofty, menschy, kind level. And by associating with this new group and having a new profession and a new patterns, you're going to become that better person. Sure, changing of residence is going to have an effect. But if you just move to another city and fall right back into the same patterns that you were doing before, how much is it going to change the decree? All right, let's go to questions and comments. Okay, with regard to a sick person being on trial for their life, Paula, what if the person suffering wants to give all their pain towards the sins of others? Is this even possible? I'm not really sure what that means. The person who is suffering, I mean, they're dealing with their pain. They are I don't think that you can undertake to suffer for others. However, you can undertake to alleviate the suffering of others. And so we learned in Tractate Brachas that when we visit a person who is ill, who's sort of in that trial for his life, as it were, when we visit that person and sit with them, and this is a big, big mitzvah, we remove 1/60th of their suffering from them. We can't remove the other 59/60ths. And it's not like 60 people can come and therefore cure the person. But whatever suffering they have, you going there removes 1/60th of it. But you can't really undertake to suffer on behalf of others. Everyone has their own accounting that they do. However, you can pray for others. That's very much possible and encouraged. A problem that often comes up in observant Jewish families is, the parents are really working hard to sort of keep the home on a high spiritual level. Young kids who, kids are kids, they want to have fun. And they can be like, I don't really want to do all this stuff. And eventually the kids get a taste of freedom and they just want to go indulge in all the pleasures that the world has to offer. And they sort of go off the path. Now, parents have to draw boundaries to the best of their ability, but there's only so much that you can do. And sometimes having a very heavy hand with disciplining the kids will send them even further off the way. But what you can always do when you see, that your kids are having the challenges that kids have, is in addition to being a parent, in addition to giving them good advice, to setting proper boundaries, to being in communication with them, to giving them unconditional love, is praying for them, right? You can always pray for somebody that they will, grow in wisdom, grow in maturity, and find their way back to a better path. Sharon, why is it that Hagar is the one who is crying, but the angel says God heard the voice of the boy? I would say they were both praying. Right, it's almost like she put him at a distance from her because she says, I don't want to see the boy die, and then the camera's focused on her. But it's not like Yishmael is over there, just sitting calmly waiting for whatever's going to happen. He was also praying for his life. He, like his mother, was afraid. They were afraid that they were going to perish out there in the desert, and so the prayers of both of them were heard. Why does the angel tell Hagar, I've heard his prayers, and not I've heard her prayers? I'm not sure. But remember that's the second time. Hagar also ran away, much earlier when Sarah started to be abusive toward her, being really mean and bossy toward her. And an angel appeared to Hagar and said, go back, submit to your mistress. It's going to be all right for you and you'll have a son. And she did. Hagar is a prophet. She has direct interaction with the voice of God, at least through this angel. Maybe what the angel is saying this in this second interchange with her is, well, I'm speaking with you. Clearly we hear your voice, but you should know that we also hear your son's voice. His prayers matter, and he is destined to be a prince. 12 princes will emerge from him. Sharon, isn't it only rabbinic speculation that Keturah is in fact Hagar? I don't think the Torah is definitive on this, is it? No, the Torah is not definitive on this, right? So in the Torah, it mentions that, Abraham is married to Sarah. Sarah gives him her slave because she was afraid that she would not have a baby. And so Abraham fathers Yishmael through Hagar. Sort of is a child that was supposed to be credited to Sarah in a way, but she ended up not wanting it and said, all right, send this woman and her son away. It's her son. Then eventually Sarah dies, and the Torah says that he married Keturah and had these other children, but that his legacy would pass through Yitzhak, and at a certain point he sends that other wife, Keturah, and those other children east with gifts. And some speculate that this was kind of some spiritual teachings that went east toward India. But we have a strong rabbinic tradition, a strong midrash tradition, that Keturah and Hagar are the same person. And maybe, I'm not sure if that tradition originates with God at Mount Sinai in an oral teaching to Moses, but that's such a strong rabbinic tradition that Hagar and Keturah are the same person that it's taught, in yeshiva as if it's the same person without needing to speculate that's one opinion. That's my understanding as I've heard it from my Rav. Bill. And then Jonah had the brass in his neck to be upset about his own success rate, right? It's like Jonah did great, and then he didn't like it. They all reformed, and so God, you're not going to make any manifestation. And then God teaches Jonah a lesson, grows the bush to provide him shade. Then he kills the bush. Then Jonah's desperate over the loss of this bush that was providing him shade. And God says to Jonah, look, you're crying because a bush died? And you want me to pass judgment on a whole city, a whole metropolis worth of people? The story of Jonah is absolutely fascinating. And we kind of sometimes have a childish notion of it. Well, that's the one about the guy in the belly of the whale. It's like a kid's book. But there's incredible depth and profundity in the story of Jonah. That's one that's always worth rereading. And that's why Maftir Yonah is so important, and we read it on Yom Kippur. I mean, it's, on the holiest, most profound day of the year, we read the book of Jonah. Okay, that's what I've got for us today. This was such an important day. So many beautiful teachings worth reflecting on. This was a key daf. Thank you for sharing it with me. A tribute to all of us here in our Beis Midrash, our class. It's really an honor and a privilege, to sort of be guiding us, but we really are a group doing this together, and I honor you for it. Have a terrific night.